Okay, here we go. Dear Mattsons, how do I set limits with my child and be consistent in discipline? Love. Too many rules?
Okay. All right, let's just be honest. Based on wiring, you hear us talk about wiring all the time. One of the things is we use an assessment called the Core Values Index. And if you want to learn more about that, you can listen to some of the first episodes on the Living Wholehearted podcast, and we unpack the different wirings, the merchant, the builder, the innovator, and the banker. But all that to say is our wirings lend us to either being a little bit more of a permissive parent or to being more of a rigid parent. Either we really like rules and structure, or we are more free-spirited and creative, or maybe we're a little bit of both. Those are kind of the best kind of parents. But usually if you've got a husband and a wife, if you're single parenting this is really hard because there's only you. But having the together husband and wife team means that we kind of can help mirror each other, balance each other. That's the word. So I probably am a little bit more of the permissive parent. Is this fair? I'm putting
That might be a little more of the structure rule following. Yeah.
And so we've had to lean on each other and saying, oh, that's a good reason why we should have a limit there. And Jeff might loosen up a little bit when I go, well, I don't know if that's one we need to have a big limit on. Okay, I just want to say that starting. And now your turn. Tossing you the ball.
Well, knowing your limits, I think I used to say this as a kids pastor all the time. Learn to love the limits, and that would just come from a why we do what we do and what's good for us. Why does God give us limits? Yeah. He gives us limits because he loves us, and he wants us to play in his playground that he created for us, and to experience the things that he created for us to experience, and to have some guardrails and some safety rails, if you will, so that we don't get into the pitfalls and the things that he would want to protect us from. So, I mean, that's the big picture, 30,000 foot view of why God creates limits for us as his kids, those his created beings,
Yeah, it reminds me real quick of the playground analogy, the research that they did with boundaries, is that children who were in a playground where there was no fence around the playground actually went right to the center of the playground and were more fearful. Yeah. But kids that were playing in a playground that had a very clear fencing around were able to go to the edges of that playground and ran around with freedom. And what it taught us in just the psychology of children is that they do better knowing what the limits are. Yeah. And so as a more permissive parent, that was such great wisdom to go, it is good for my kids to know where the limit is and then where the freedom is.
Now, if you got the clipboard and you're kind of maybe err on the rules side of things a little more like I do, where it's just like, oh, wait a second, and all the interruptions and the, about the limits, and we make that to the emphasis, then we lose relationship. Some friends of ours say it this way, the parrots, rules without relationships breeds rebellion. And relationships without rules breeds entitlement. And there's just some really good wisdom behind that. So we want to emphasize and look for kind of some of that balance that we can find between rules, that never, letting in relationship and never letting one dominate the other per se, but there's a sweet spot in there. There's a wisdom in that.
They're like the guardrails of keeping you safe on the road. So it's a good relationship and rules, or limits and rules. And so we'll end with this practical. So in the play therapy world, we use something called the ACT model. And we did this a lot with our kids, and it's more natural now that they're older teens, but it's language you've got to practice. A is acknowledge the emotion. That's the relationship side. I see that you're frustrated or that you're angry that you can't have the cookie. Okay, that might be a common one for some of you with younger kids. Yeah. You're angry right now that you can't have the cookie.
You say that to the teenager.
I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to empathize with that because it's frustrating to not get the cookie, right? So acknowledge. C is communicate the limit, but we're not going to have a cookie before dinner. Yeah. Okay, that's the limit. So you got to get better as a parent thinking, what is the fence around the playground? What is the limit that I'm setting? And I'm just going to communicate it clearly. And then T, I'm going to target an alternative, because nobody likes just a no because it's a no. Yeah. And I think our God is pretty permissive in terms of he wants us to enjoy life, an abundant life. Yeah. He has some limits. They're kind of clear cut, like you have to come to God through Jesus. That's a very clear limit. But there's a lot of freedom in how we get to express our faith, right? So there's this idea of acknowledging, I see you're frustrated, you can't have the cookie. communicate the limit. The cookie's not for eating before dinner, but the alternative, target an alternative is you can have the cookie after dinner, or you can have the cookie tomorrow after lunch, or, right? So you've got to have an idea of what else can happen that's a permissive piece. I know you want to go to the party. You're really frustrated that we have our family gathering that night and you can't go. But you got to go to the family gathering. This is grandma's 80th birthday. We don't know how much longer we're going to have her around. So you got to go, target an alternative. But the next party you can definitely go to, and we'll make that a priority over other things.
Or we can create a party, and we'll help fund that experience.
Or invite a bunch of friends over the next night, and we'll make it work. So that's how you have to get creative as parents, and you can do that with a 2-year-old, and you can do that with a teenager.
So remember, you are the right person for the job, and we're here to cheer you on.